Good morning, Maine. Chuck Ellis here, the host of the Muddy Waters podcast, where we do the best that we can to help you understand the muddy waters that exist in Maine and American, in particularly Maine politics, but also sometimes we get into things on a national level, so that you can understand how to appropriately navigate them. And I do that not by being the expert myself, like a Ben Shapiro who tries to tell you that he knows everything, but by bringing in guests who can share a little bit about what's going on from their perspective. Sometimes they're experts and other times they're activists. Today, we have with us, we're fortunate to be blessed with Kris, Kristina, but I think Kris Parker. How are you doing, Kris?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And so Kristina Parker is a Christian, conservative, constitutionalist. She was born in 2005, raised in Sydney, Maine. She grew up involved in her local church and was homeschooled for most of her education. She is actively operating as president of the Turning Point USA Kennebec County Activism Hub, which she co-founded in 2002. She serves as the Maine State Chair, or she served, I should say, as the Maine State Chair as the Maine... If I can get my words out, this will be great. It'll be better when you start talking. She served for Young Americans for Liberty in 2024, and she is currently on the board for Maine Right to Life. In her free time, she attended Turning Point USA's America Fest and Young Women's Leadership Summit conferences. Her activism hub, geez, my English is struggling today. Her Activision Hub has hosted several speaker events, the largest of which drew over 200 attendees. She also attended Leadership Institute's Christian Leaders Statesman Conference in Kentucky and the Boston Youth Leadership School, of which she was a top graduate. She learned proper political technology, public program presentation, and numerous soft skills necessary for the professional and political aspects of activism. Her passions include volleyball, archery, that just is fascinating to me, philosophy, learning, and advocating for the protection of all constitutional rights. She will continue to use the skills that she has gained from her political training and experiences to make a difference in local and state level politics by training like-minded conservatives and staying active in her community. So once again, welcome, Kris. How did it feel to have me read that entire thing on air?
It made me feel like you were reading back an English assignment that I had in like junior or senior year. And I'm thinking, oh, am I going to get a good grade on this? Because I wrote that a little while ago.
Yeah.
I don't blame you for stumbling a little bit. It's kind of long.
Yeah, well, it's not quite as long as the one I had to read for the Lincoln dinner, because we had Bobby Charles on there, and that guy served in basically 3 different White Houses, amongst other things, and anyway. Yeah. And he also, I think he went to he got stuff from Harvard, some stuff from Oxford. What's the other? Anyway, Dartmouth, I think. Anyway, he's got all kinds of
checking all the boxes.
So, but outside of that, it's one of the longer bios that I've had the pleasure of reading. And how is it that you have such a long bio, being that it says you were born in 2005, so you're not even 20 years old yet?
Yeah, well, I would have to say it started with the way that my parents raised me. And my mom was always super active in specifically pro-life and pro-gun causes, but also in advocating against doctor-prescribed suicide and things like that, basic conservative values. So I grew up going to the State House every once in a while for rallies or to testify. I think I testified against a magazine capacity bill when I was like 12 years old, and I wrote the testimony and I read it in front of the committee and everything like that. So I grew up going to the State House, and my mom served on the Kennebec County Republican Committee, and she was an ultrasound tech at local pregnancy center. So I've always kind of been around politics, and I didn't realize that wasn't normal until I started talking to other students and other kids my age, and their parents didn't do what my mom did. And what really got me involved, because I already kind of knew about politics and I was interested and I kind of paid attention, but the one thing that really drove me into it was Turning Point USA's conference America Fest in 2022, I think. And I was going out to Arizona to visit a friend with my other friend, Anna Gary. So we were flying out to Arizona to visit someone, and they're like, dude, we got to go to this conference. It's the most amazing thing ever. It'll blow your mind. And of course, I was kind of like, whatever, we're only there for a couple of days, and this conference is 4 days long. There's no way it's going to be that cool. But my friends really wanted to go, so I was like, fine, we'll just do it. Like, we'll go to the conference. They have cool people: Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, Dennis Prager, huge, huge speaker list. So I go, and it ended up changing my life. And you're surrounded by 12,000 other conservatives, especially students. So like-minded individuals that are your age that you can talk to like face to face, and they don't just exist on the internet somewhere. So we went to that conference and we came back, started the chapter, brought in all of our homeschool friends and, local Christian kids in the area who we grew up going to church with. And since then, it kind of snowballed into me getting involved with, Republican politics, but additionally, like my local pregnancy center and the Leadership Institute, and sometimes with a little bit with Young Americans for Liberty, and now Maine Right to Life. And just now it's what I do. I'm really passionate about conservative Christian politics.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it is one of the things we were saying off air is like, it's surprising sometimes to find young people, especially young women who are conservative. Mm-hmm. As I was sharing, like you hear a lot of these stories, or you see a lot in social media about the young liberal women who are upset about the fact that they can't find a young man who is both a good man and also not a conservative, which
and
is
not
just
gay.
Well, that too, yeah. And so anyway, so it's rare to find young people, and I think in the Republican Party we're always like salivating for younger people. I go to Cumberland County Republican Committee meetings, and I'm a little bit older than I look, so 41, and I'm still like one of the youngest people in the room, and they're like excited to have somebody my age there to see somebody your age who's actively engaged in politics, in especially in a state like Maine, is quite rare. So we're really excited to have you. So
speaking of young people at committee meetings, about 2 years ago, my friend and I went to my local committee meeting. It was my first time going, and she was going to talk about Turning Point, get some people kind of interested in our chapter, maybe send their kids to come to our club meetings. And I looked around, and there was me, and there was my friend Anna, who's my age. And then the next oldest person was my mom, who was, I think, about 40 at the time. And, that's like a 20-year age gap. And then beyond that, she was the youngest by like 10, 15 years. And I was like, wow, we got some work to do.
We really do, but I appreciate that you're working on it. So you drew an event. So primarily, well, actually, let me just ask you, rather than me trying to talk, like, so how did you start a chapter? Because it seems like it would be really difficult to get young people interested in politics in Maine. So how did you do that? And then what exactly do you guys do? Because I've heard about Turning Point, and I see Charlie Kirk, and I see his conversations with people on the street, which I think are incredible. But what do you guys do? So like, how did you get started, and then what do you do?
Well, we got started, and what it looked like is we sat down with the pastor at our church, and we talked about using the fellowship hall as our venue. And I mean, he prayed for us, and we moved forward with the chapter, and we had a very set mission, which is to educate ourselves and others, and just promote conservative values and be informed citizens is kind of what our mission statement is. I don't know the exact wording that we came up with, but we basically invited everybody we know. And when you're in the position that I am, as like just a Christian homeschooler or whatever, like you end up knowing all the other Christian homeschoolers in the area, and their moms are friends, and everyone goes to church together and youth group and stuff like that. So we basically invited anyone who we thought might be interested and said, hey, give us a chance, come to this first meeting, see what it's about. And we tried to make it exciting. We had pizza, and the field rep came, and we did posters, and we had posters like these kind of, and we talked about how we can make a difference, but also it's a place to socialize. So it's about the politics and the learning and stuff like that, but it's also nice, like that you're guaranteed like every 2 weeks or every other week when you have your chapter meeting that you're going to be able to hang out with your friends, play games. Sometimes we'll watch movies. Sometimes we'll bring in a speaker. Sometimes we'll run events, things like that, and volunteer together. So it has to be fun and exciting in order for anybody basically under the age of 25 to be interested, and probably people older than that. Like you have to care. It has to be worth your time, instead of you staying home and watching Netflix or doing whatever you're going to do. So we make it engaging, we make it fun, and that's the biggest part. And then as for the chapter going is, after a couple weeks, you see who's committed, who's not. And we basically have like 10 to 15 students who are really interested. And then we have, I think, some other friends who are almost on like an outer circle of that. So you have the really knit circle, and then you have your broader influence, like our newsletter list. We have 100, 200 people on our newsletter list who want to come to our public events, but obviously the over like 25, they don't come to our chapter meetings. So we, at our chapter meetings, like I said, we'll do presentations, movies, board game nights. We had PragerU night where we watched videos from what used to be called Prager University and now PragerView and PragerU, and we talked about it and discussed, how does it impact us, personal responsibility, what it means to be a conservative. And I think we have bowling on the agenda. I talked to my students. I was like, what do you guys want to do? Because I could sit here and yap at you about like my political philosophy, but like we got to do more than that. And they said bowling. So we're going to do bowling next month, and it's I Love America night because it's around Valentine's Day. So you got to make it fun. And then it's a community of people who are like-minded. And then since after that, we started having speaker events, or we hosted the Leadership Institute as a training, and that's where we get those bigger.
Oh, did we lose you? Looks like we might have lost Kristina. So if you're paying attention, if you're still there, if I'm still there, that's part of the question. Did I get lost? Anyway, while we wait to see if we can get Kristina back on the podcast, which there she is. All right. So I don't know what happened.
It looks like I lost you for a second, but
that's all right. Yeah. So you were saying fun events, and then you started talking about, I think, the Leadership Institute and the bigger events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Leadership Institute is a conservative organization that is specifically geared towards identifying and training conservatives into being leaders who can make and affect change. And they offer to basically fly an expert down on a certain topic, and they'll teach you all about it. So we've hosted those types of trainings before for students and parents, but then also speakers. So we've had Seth Gruber come speak, and we've had Anthony Watson speak, and we've also done movie nights, and we've had a panel with local activists before. So things like that, where we can engage the public and expand our activism beyond just ages like 15 to 22.
Nice. No, that's really cool. Like, how do you I guess you've talked about how you kind of like get people engaged just by having it be fun and exciting and focused on the values. You also, I'm assuming part of what you're trying to do too is reach out to people who maybe don't already agree with you.
It's with Turning Point USA, and I guess I'll give an explanation of Turning Point just for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what Turning Point USA is. But it was founded by Charlie Kirk after he decided he didn't want to go to community college anymore because he thought it was a waste of time, which for a lot of people, college is a waste of time.
Yep.
For myself, I'm not currently interested in going to college because I can get a job and make money and, like I said, be a productive member of society without it. So Turning Point is a conservative Christian organization that creates chapters or clubs on high school and college campuses. And they want to be a conservative presence and community for, individuals who believe in that on those college campuses, but also, like you said, to influence people who might be on the more liberal, leftist, maybe Democrat side of things, which anyone who I think has been on the internet knows that college is just a place for leftist ideology to just run amok and be taken as truth and fact, and just I don't think that's true. It shouldn't be taken as factual, and we need to have open discussion of ideas and things like that. So that's what Turning Point is for. The tricky thing with our chapter is, like I said, we're an activism hub. So we don't actually have a specific school that we are located at. We're just a bunch of homeschoolers, and like we have friends who go to public schools and private schools. Some people are graduated and working. So activism hub. And we haven't had a whole lot of time to interact with people on the other side. I imagine that's going to happen in the future as we grow to be bigger. But our main focus for our specific chapter would be to grow and educate people within our circle so that they can stand against someone who might have different ideas than them in the future. And like I said, grow into being productive citizens who understand their Constitution, understand American history and Christian values, and how those play into politics.
Yeah, so you talk about the Christian values, and I think that's really interesting. And I'm a
Mhm.
Christian, and you know, what's it? A couple months ago, I've run for office twice for state house. I'm in Westbrook. It's a little bit, the
Mhm.
political scene is a little different here than Waterville, or Kennebec County. You know, so in running for office, like one of the things that I've tried to do, I'm pretty good at having boundaries, right? So I worked in the bank at one point. I was doing politics, and you know, I'm a Christian, right? And so I'm like, I'm not going to not talk about anything in any one place, but I understand that the way in which you go about bringing things into conversation, sometimes you have to be careful to not like not use not use the church, for instance, to get more business for the bank or things along those lines. You have to have those boundaries. But I also think that like within myself, I was a little bit more reserved than I needed to be. And part of it is there's this idea that's pushed in our society by the secular society that, you know, we don't talk about religion and we don't talk about politics, but we definitely don't combine religion and politics. This is the idea in our culture.
That's a
What do
recipe
you
for disaster.
what, well, there's I was going to say, what do you have to say to that?
I mean, the first thing I would say about the boundaries and deciding what to say and what not to say is sometimes it's not about what you say, but rather how you carry yourself. So, the number one thing you could do is make sure that you're a kind individual who has integrity and you work hard and you don't talk bad about other people because you, being conservative, you're bearing the image of everybody else who is a conservative Christian. So, if you mess up, they're not going to want to talk to somebody else who's a conservative Christian because they think, you know, they're a bigot jerk and they don't have any integrity. So you do have to keep that in mind. But when it comes to having those conversations about religion and Christianity is I think that things are insanely polarized right now. And like I said,
Yeah.
I'm only 19, so I wasn't alive for many elections. I've only, if you do the math, it's like four or five, and three of them have had Donald Trump on the ballot every time. So things have been so polarized the last 8 to 10 years because you have someone like example Kamala Harris, where it seemed like she wanted to do what's it called, like price locks with rent, and there was a lot of things that seemed almost kind of communist and talking about
Yep.
racism and abortion and I'm taking all the guns away, and Trump saying I don't want to take all the guns away, and calling each other Nazis. And it just seems so polarized, and they're just like way over here in other directions. And I don't think that's how it's always been. And for some reason, we have this like hatred towards the left. And do I hate the idea that a friend of mine who's 15 could be going through puberty and have a really hard time and then they're getting their breast chopped off? Yeah, I hate that idea, but I don't hate her for thinking that kind of thing. And
Mm.
it's having open discussions and not getting all heated and frustrated and going insane when you're talking to somebody is how we're going to be able to move forward since we're on such opposite side of things. So you have to be able to have those discussions. So like I like talking about religion, I like talking about philosophy and psychology and obviously politics and all of those things. And I think they're necessary to be addressed in order to have a functioning society. So we have to find out a way to do that. And like I said, you have to carry yourself well. You can't get all insane and lose your head and start yelling or anything like that. Is I You see time and time again, if you've ever seen Charlie Kirk on a college campus or any of those people, and they start talking to the leftists, and the leftist like threatens their life or upturns their table or takes their stickers and throws them all over the place. They get very violent. So I think on our side, we want to have those reasonable conversations, and we're just going to have to keep doing that until we slowly win enough people over that the more animated side of things, people on them where they get heated and excited and loud and angry and things like that, so we can slowly work our way into having conversations with them, which I almost compare it to sharing the gospel, because you have to do the same thing when you're sharing the gospel. Is you have to plant seeds and you have to carry yourself well as a disciple of Christ.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, and you hit it out of the park. I think it's so important. You didn't use these words, but it's one of the things I talk about frequently on my podcast. Is one of the things that we need to bring back in our society is civil discourse, right? And I
Yeah,
think, as you
that's what I
said,
was trying to say.
yeah, as you said, this idea of not talking about these things in public, you know, and just keeping them privately to ourselves. There's two things that I would say about that. One is that's a violation of the First Amendment, because as a Christian, I believe that like my faith actually impacts every aspect of my life, including
Hmm.
politics. So if you tell me to keep my religion out of politics, you're telling me what to practice for a religion. And that is a violation of the First
Good
Amendment.
point.
It's against our Constitution. But ultimately, not having conversations about the most important things in life is a, as you said, a recipe for disaster. So I love the way that you went through that. I think it's so important that we talk about that. I do think that there's a lot of people that have concern about like blending a religion and politics. And one of my concerns sometimes, and this is why I was a little bit more, it's not that I wouldn't talk about it. It's not that I don't talk about those things. I'm just a little careful about how I enter into those conversations. And as you said, how I communicate within that. But I had been a little reluctant to even like emphasize my faith impacting certain political ideals, partly because there's this view in our culture. I think I shouldn't say this view in our culture. I think there are people who are in politics and claim to be Christians as a tactic to garner trustworthiness from people and to
Yeah.
win votes. And, I think
It
that's
doesn't
one
happen
of the
just in
challenges.
politics.
Well, this is true.
I
Yeah,
think it happens because we're human, and
right.
politics just makes everything seem more animated and bigger because there's more money and power and influence and stuff. So you see it more in politics, but I think it happens everywhere.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, when it comes to the realm of politics, what are the issues? And I think we probably have touched on these to some degree, but I want you to give you an opportunity. What are the issues that you're most passionate about? What are, if you could say like 3 or 4 that are your primary motivators?
I mean, I will always be pro gun because I think that, especially as a woman, and like I'm not very strong or big, like I'm tall, but that doesn't really do much for me. I need a firearm to defend myself against like a 200-pound 6'4" dude. Like, there's nothing I can do about it otherwise. So, first of all, I need the Second Amendment to defend myself against, I guess, people, but then also like the government, because if the government knows that you don't have a gun in your house, they're going to knock down your door and arrest you. But if they know, you got an AR-15 and a 45, they might be less hesitant to come in and try and take your rights away. So I will always be super pro gun, just period. And then also pro life, because I think that if we don't value life, then everything is going to fall to pieces. Like I said, recipe for disaster. It's another recipe for disaster is not valuing human life from the beginning. And if you start saying, well, this baby is only allowed to survive if it doesn't have Down syndrome, or if it doesn't have like this genetic problem, or if it has made it this far into the pregnancy. And then you're saying that human worth is dependent on how useful they are. And I don't think that's very godly. So those are always my two really big ones. But my third one branches into a lot of different categories, but I think it's the idea of thinking and like free thought and free speech, which this is one of my favorite posters. It says, think it's not illegal yet. And I think that common sense and critical thinking skills are super important. And the only way you're going to achieve that is through free speech. And I mean, that's why people go to talk therapy. That's why people journal. That's why people talk to their friends when they had a bad day, is because you have to be able to dissect those things through speech. And half the time, if you ever watch a Jordan Peterson lecture, which I would recommend, is he says that he goes in and he finds a question like, what is the meaning of life? But he doesn't know the answer to that. So he takes the time of an hour and he thinks it through, and he goes down all these different avenues and explores all these different ideas from so many different people, and then he finally lands on an answer. So you have to have open discourse in order to come with the best ideas. So I say free speech and thinking would be my third category.
Nice. I think those in particular, I love. If I could use words, like you're a great speaker tonight. I look like an idiot, but that's my job. So I love all 3 of those answers. Short version. I think that one of the reasons that Trump winning in 2024 was so important is because it ensured, because they were literally talking about like if Democrats had won, they were going to start to limit free speech. There were literal arguments
Yeah.
that they were making. They were already doing it. They were pressuring social media companies, and they were
Yep.
going to add more teeth to that. So anyway, that I think that, but that is the foundation of democracy, is free
Hmm.
speech, or we're I know that we're a constitutional republic. Most people mean
Yeah.
democracy. That's what most people mean when they say democracy. But we are,
Yeah.
so in order to have this type of society, you have to have that. One of the things though that has kind of happened in our society, especially here in Maine, where we have a bit of a defeatist attitude, but we also, there are demographics that are real. And so if we don't convert, if we don't have civil discourse and we don't convert people over to our way of thinking, we don't have a lot of hope, because the majority of people, according to demographics, do not agree with with conservative ideals, or at least their voting record has not seemed to
I
be
might
that way.
disagree, actually.
Okay, go for it.
I think demographic wise, I'll disagree a little bit, and the reason for that is like I think there are more Democrats than there are Republicans, but I'm not necessarily convinced. And the reason for that is this is something Charlie Kirk said, is he kind of explained why the Democrats keep winning and why they keep winning with these like ludicrous ideas. And it's because to someone who is not a Christian, politics is their church. And this, I'm not taking credit for this idea, but this is how I start to see things, is that if you're a Democrat and you're not a Christian, then you need somewhere where you can serve other people and you need community. So they end up doing that through politics by getting on student councils and school boards and town councils and running for representative and door knocking for their favorite candidate and stuff. And they put all this effort into driving out their side of things, and they get so loyal. But then if you're a Christian and you know that your home is up in heaven and you belong in church on Sunday and, you know, Wednesday night, whenever your Bible study is, and taking time with your family, which you also value, then politics might not be as important to you unless at church on Sunday, you hear that it is important and that it's almost your duty as a Christian to at least advocate for what's right and wrong and advocate against what's wrong in politics. So I think that the issue isn't that we have less people on our side. It's the fact that we haven't been able to craft a message that is motivating enough for them to do something and act on what they do actually believe.
Interesting. I think it's an interesting thought. I do think in general, right, you tend to have a motivated minority that tends to kind of craft the message and push the agenda, right? And maybe you should spend some time down in Portland though, because it's crazy down here. But anyway, I think here Portland and the coast is absolutely insane. I would love to get some people to go down. I kind of want to try to organize this. So if you're listening and you're interested, let's do this, and just have some people do some Charlie Kirk style on the street conversations with people in Portland, partly and record it, partly because I think it's good to have conversations and they can lead somewhere, but also to record the absurdity of what's going on there. So that's just a kind of fun thing that I would like to do. But aside from that, what's interesting, there's also a lot of talk within the conservative movement about taking a step away from the issue of abortion and the right to life kind of element. And I just because I think there's a belief within the conservative movement that we need to stop talking about this issue because it's an issue that we continually lose on. And I would ask, what are your thoughts about that?
I will never step back from what I believe and say anything against the fact that life begins at conception and it needs to be protected and respected from that point on. I would never say that we should step back from that. And I think that, well, it's interesting because the Democrats and the left ran on abortion rights and people didn't seem to care that much. But then also you're saying that people aren't voting conservative because the conservatives are too pro-life. So you have to think about those two things and contrast them and see what really matters and what's going to make an impact. But it's difficult because I think you should always say what you think and you should always say pro-life is the answer. But I think maybe if you can go down the avenue of, converting people to Christianity or at least sharing the gospel, is you're always going to have to do that. But if you can advocate for common sense, critical thinking, and love, which is what you're supposed to do as Christians, is be loving and kind and respectful to other people, is I think that almost if you can work on those things, the integrity, the love, the kindness, and standing up for truth. And that's another thing is I wanted to say is that don't act like you have to defend yourself all the time to them, because then you're almost admitting that they're right and you're in the wrong and you're getting all defensive and you're trying to debate your side. Ask them why they think what they think. That's just like a little bonus hack tip for you guys.
Yeah.
But when you're having those conversations, is always say you're pro-life and say that murder's wrong. But some of the real work, I think, is gonna push your fall. Some of the real work is gonna come from teaching people how to think, and then they're gonna realize if they do like a little bit of research into like the lifespan of like the fetus from like 0 months to 9 months, they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is murder, and then they'll come alongside you there. So I think you almost have to do both. Is you always have to stand firm in what you believe with the pro-life side of things, but you also have to actively inch forward and do the work almost on the other side of the aisle alongside with the pro-life thing. But you can't just campaign on being pro-life, because that's not going to work. You have to have all of the other things, like saying you're going to try and bring grocery and rent prices down.
Right. Well, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's part of what people are talking about, because I'm never going to stop being pro-life. But like when you're running for office, the question is like, what issues do you emphasize? Now, like some people are going to want you to shout from the rooftops, like actually on both sides of the aisle. On this one, people are going to want you to shout from your rooftop where you stand on this issue. And if you don't agree with them, there are a lot of single issue voters on this issue alone. I think in 2022, we saw that, right? With Roe versus Wade being overturned, like you saw people come out in droves. And I know tons of people who would have voted for me, actually, who forgot that I was on the ballot because their plan was just to show up and vote straight D all the way down, because of Roe versus Wade being overturned, and their concerns about like LePage at that point, restricting abortion.
Sure.
Anyway. And so I think it's a matter of how you campaign and just understanding the demographics of the area that you're in and how people think. But I do agree. One of the things I noted from the debates between Demi Kuzinis and Angus King, and then whoever else was on there, was that I couldn't tell the difference from the debate between Demi and Angus. And I know Demi is more conservative, but like on a lot of the issues, it seemed like she was trying to seem more reasonable because she knew that she needed some more liberals to vote for her, something along those lines. I don't know if that's what was happening, or if she actually really did agree on all those issues, but you don't distinguish yourself. And I also think it's disingenuous to say to again, I don't think we should be lying in politics, and I don't think we should say what people want to hear just because they want to hear it. Because I think that a candidate that stands in their integrity in what they believe, even if people aren't in love with every aspect of what they believe, is going to put you in a better chance to win than caving and being a chameleon. If that makes sense. But anyway, that's a side note. That's for free.
Well, my thoughts on that would be, I know of candidates where they don't put that on their home card that they leave in your door, but if someone asks them, then they'll talk about it. But I think in local politics, especially, and when you're in Maine and you realize that nobody can afford anything, I say campaign on the things that people really, really care about, because there's only a certain percentage of the population that actually cares about abortion. And I think that was made clear with the Trump win in the presidential election, is the Democrats were like, oh, this isn't as important as being able to feed my family, kind of thing. So it depends on your district.
I would suggest that had more to do with how horrible their candidate was than that.
Well, there's that too.
People might be pro-choice, but are they so pro-choice that they want to choose Kamala Harris? And the answer we found was no.
I mean, I say you're pro-life because you respect life. And I mean, even if you want to fall back on the argument, which this is a perfectly reasonable argument for some people, is that obviously to a lot of the population, there's kind of like this a little bit of doubt, and they're not 100% sure whether the baby is alive or not at that point, which I know it's alive and science says it's alive, but they might not be convinced. But even if there's any possibility whatsoever that you're killing a human child, maybe you should err on the fact that, oh, maybe we won't do anything about it. So you could have that as your argument. That's what you could tell people, is you'd be like, if it's alive, then I don't want to be a murderer, kind of thing. But campaign on what people care about, and then be honest when they ask you about certain policies, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is I think you and I were discussing this both when we talked on the phone a couple, maybe a month ago, and then also before, is that one of the challenges we have to reaching young people and getting young people involved in politics is that most of the people in the Republican Party are, or at least the people in the Republican Party that show up to meetings, are north of 50. Most of them really
North.
north of 60, right? And so we have an older party. And one of the things that I've been kind of like thinking about for a number of years is that, like, when you have basically anybody, I think the dividing line is based on people who grew up with some access to the internet versus people who didn't, right? So it seems like there's the people who grew up without the internet. So most of like Gen X and older, versus people who grew up with the internet, your millennials and younger. Those two, if you're on one side of that river, you have a really hard time communicating with people on the other side of that line, so to speak.
Yeah.
There is
Well,
an
you're seeing
exception.
entirely different worlds.
Yeah, and I think you've got some people who are like your younger Gen X's and your older millennials who have the capacity to communicate on both sides because they kind of had an experience of growing up a little bit without the internet, but then they had it somewhere along the lines, and I think that divides it. So, what advice would you give to people who are older but want to try and reach younger people with the message of conservatism, Christianity, whatever it might be? Either one of those or both.
I think there's probably room. Well, this is something that people, especially in Maine, you have to understand is that we're like either first, second, or third in the entire like American Union for oldest population. So
Yeah.
it's already difficult in Maine because our population is older as opposed to like in Texas. And we're a Democrat state. So then you're even at less people. So I think it comes down to the fact that parents and adults with children in their lives have the duty to get their children involved. I think that's the number one thing. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, is that the reason I am involved in politics is because I saw my mom doing it, and I realized this is important. I should do something about this. People are dying, or people are, getting taxed to death. Stuff like that is you need to get involved. So bring your kids along to your monthly meetings. I mean, even if a couple parents bring their kids along and one mom goes in the other room with like 10 kids, babysit them, the idea of bringing those kids to the meetings, like, this is important. We're going to get in the car and go to this for an hour. I mean, meetings really shouldn't be in more than an hour for regular county committee stuff. That's at least my opinion. Is it get it done in an hour, or you're being not very efficient with your time. But like, bring the kids along and kind of talk. You don't have to make it the number one subject in your house, but you do have to say, we vote, and this is what we believe, and other people might not believe that, but that's okay. Is you have to have it as kind of a conversation. So bring your kids to the meetings, and you have to make the meetings actually exciting so that they don't like cry when you're trying to put them in the car to bring them to the meetings. And I'm not saying like maybe your 2-year-old doesn't need to go, but maybe over the age of 8, make them bring a book, coloring book, whatever it is. They can sit and color while you're at the hour-long meeting. It's no different than church. So bring them along, but it also has to be exciting. Like I said, with the students, is we have engaging speakers and videos, and sometimes we'll do volunteer projects, and we have fun posters and pins and stickers, and we make social media posts, and we watch cool videos, and we talk about things that are going to impact us. So that's something that I think was really important in a lot of elections, is how do you care about rent prices? That's how I got my buddy to go vote for Trump. I was like, are you registered to vote? He said no. Are you going to vote? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, how do you care? Do you care about rent prices? Can you afford your groceries? What about heating? And like just things like that. How are your prospects of being able to have a family someday? And then people my age are going to be like, oh, not looking good. So you have to get them engaged on that front, but then you also have to tell them that they can make a difference, and they have to know that there's some point and there's some reason behind them being involved and putting in their work. Because like, there's nothing more ineffective than someone who's not motivated. So you stick a kid in school, and all they want to be doing is working on a construction site and making money, and working out in the woods or something. But you're like, oh well, you should work on your flashcards. This guy who's 17 years old isn't going to care about high school. They have to actually care, and it has to be engaging. So and they have to think they can do something about it, because someone sitting there doing a menial task that's pointless, they it's going to depress them. So you have to frame in a way where they can make sense. So give them a job. And I think this is part of the problem is that you have these 6-year-olds who are like, well, Gen Z, they're dumb and they just want to stare at their phones all day and they don't know anything. They didn't have to grow up the way I did. Like, there's no hope for this generation, blah, 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 blah. People are going to stay where they're at unless you give them responsibility to rise above where you're putting them, I think is what I have to say about that is giving yourself more responsibility is going to give you more meaning in life. And also it's going to make you do those things because you're responsible for doing it. So if you get these kids, put them on like campaign envelopes or postcards, they can knock doors. I know plenty of 18-year-olds who knock doors for Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. They do it for 3 days straight for 10 hours a day, knocking doors, talking to people about why abortion's wrong and why they should vote against the pro-choice candidate. Like, they're capable of more than you think. Imagine what, especially 60, 50, 70-year-olds, what were you doing when you were 16 years old? You're probably helping out on the farm or at least doing some chores or watching your siblings or mowing the lawn next door. So people my age are more than capable of being involved, and you have to encourage them to rise to that occasion. So keeping all of these things in mind going forward is important.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the things that one of the ways in which we fail our children and our youth in general is by not believing in them. And I think and kind of writing them off as being hopeless. And the reality is that's not true. And I don't have any kids at this point, though. I've got, I'm hoping my wife will get here. Maybe we'll be able to change that at some point in the near future. She's hoping to be here by April. I'm hoping by July. Well, I'd love to see her here in April, but the process. She's in Africa at the moment. Anyway, so anyway, I don't have any kids myself, but when I ran for office a little over 2 years ago for the first time, a good friend of mine had a son. Exactly what age he was at that point. I think 14 or 15 or something like that. And he was beginning to be a little bit interested in politics. So I invited him to come along with me and go knock doors. And he became my most consistent door knocking partner. And he loved it. Now, he didn't say a whole lot. He just kind of came along and observed. It was great for me, though, because people were a lot less likely to be rude to me. If I've got a young child there, they're not going to attack. Some people still said some mean stuff, but for the most part, people were much more polite. Oh, great. I'm glad that it's got my thumbs up on here. But people are a lot more polite when he was with me than when he wasn't. And he's still very engaged with politics. He's got a better I think he's better
grasp.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. I told you I can't speak today, apparently. But then his dad, who is somebody who is very, politically engaged himself, and so, but I think just stuff like that, getting people involved and giving them the opportunity and believing in them, I think is really important. So I think that those are some really great points.
I have an additional anecdote about the kid involved thing. Is, like I said, I was super involved as a young child and stuff, and I specifically remember it was for the 4th of July parade, and it's when Eric Brakey was running to be U.S. Senator, I believe, was his race, and against Angus. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And I was in charge. We went over to his house, and we were working with a couple other campaign volunteers, and I was, probably, I don't want to do the math right now, but 10 years old. And we were putting stickers on water bottles to hand out at 4th of July. Kids can put stickers on water bottles. Well, what if you're doing a huge mailing project? Last campaign, I did over, I think, 5,000 letters. Wow. All of those letters needed return address stickers, and all of them need stamps. My kids use stickers all the time. Have them putting stickers on there and make it a race. This is another thing I wanted to say about getting youth involved. This is what I've seen campaigns do in the past, is you have to make it a competition. It has to be exciting and fun. Bring some pizza. Say if you're the winner, you're going to get this swag. Spend $20 on a gift card, something like that. Is making a competition. Who can stamp the most envelopes in 10 minutes? And within reason. They have to actually be on there. But who can do it the fastest? Or who can write the prettiest postcard? And who can make the coolest social media graphic? Is if you make it exciting and engaging, then they're already doing exciting, engaging things for the most part. With their sports, they find their sports fun because it's competitive and they have to work hard and there's expectations of them and they want to excel. Same things with chess club or debate club or if they're playing with Legos, being creative, is you just have to take those things that people already love and connect them to politics, which is not only something that I love, but it's also really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's really great. I think it also is a reminder that when we sometimes feel like we don't have people to like enough people to help with things, that we have an untapped resource in our children, like that they actually can contribute, they can help. So it actually doubles. Is more than just like it'll help ensure that they stay involved, and that will also ensure that you have more people to help. Um,
It's better than
that's
scrolling TikTok all day. I'll tell you that much. It's
yeah.
better than what a lot of kids are doing.
So speaking of TikTok, I actually wanted to go here, so I'm glad you brought us here. One of the things that I feel like the Republican Party needs to do better here in the state of Maine, and by the Republican Party I mean Republicans, and I don't mean that this has to come only from the Maine GOP. Although if the Maine GOP participated in better in social media, that would be great. But like it seems to me that
I'd
one
say
of the
that
other
the
ways
House Republicans are doing a good job. The House
they've
Republicans do have a TikTok account and they're growing, so I want to give them credit there.
I will give them credit there too, because I don't think they had when I remember about a year ago, maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was a little bit less. I was looking on TikTok and I searched for, Maine, Maine politics, right? The only thing I could find was something from like some Maine public radio or something like that had some ads that had been seen by like tens of thousands of people, and that was it. And it was stuff that was like like the one that I remember was in favor of having the government take over CMP, and it's like, oh,
Oh,
disgusting.
Pine True Power, yeah.
Yeah, that crap. So like we didn't have any presence before, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to start doing some stuff on there. And so I started on TikTok. But yes, I have noticed that the Maine House Republicans have upped their game, and so we'll give credit where credit is due. They're even trying to get creative and have these like fun videos. We'll call them fun videos. That's they're not just somebody sitting and standing in front of a camera. So they're doing a bit more. So will give some credit there. But in general, there's not a lot going on. But am I right in assuming that like if we want to reach the youth, we've got to do better at TikTok in particular, Instagram, but social media?
I would say yes. Personally, I kind of loathe social media. Um, I think that if other people in my generation wake up, they'll realize how much time they're wasting on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and how addictive it is, and how harmful it can be to your mental and physical health and spiritual health and things like that. Is I think it is really damaging. But unfortunately, that's where people my age are. So I would say that getting onto those platforms would be really important. And I mean, there's evidence of that. Donald Trump made a TikTok video and it got millions upon millions of views. And it was just him hanging out with like Jake Paul or Logan Paul. Charlie Kirk takes his interactions with students on college campuses and they clip it up for 2 minutes, whatever, they stick it on TikTok, and it gets so many views because it's short content where you can see what people are thinking. When Vivek Ramaswamy was running for the Republican primary, he did a really fantastic job of engaging the youth vote because, first of all, he was on the younger side. He wasn't in his 60s and 70s like a lot of candidates. But I specifically remember a video where he said, I'm going to tell you my campaign plan in less amount of time than it takes this guy to do this Rubik's Cube. And it was some guy that was really good at Rubik's Cubes. He could do it in like less than 60 seconds. And it got a bunch of views. And then he went water skiing right before the debate, and people thought that was really interesting. So I say that if you can harness that energy that Trump had and Vivek did have, and take the things that are already getting the youth's attention on TikTok and turning it into political format, and not just negative though, because we already have plenty of negative TikTok stuff. But if you can talk positively about bills or candidates or campaigns and make it a little flashy, a little exciting, some color, and someone who's animated and doesn't just sit there and drone on and talk really slow and boring like that, make it interesting, and then people will be interested in what you're talking about, which is politics. So I would agree that getting onto those platforms at least a little bit would be beneficial.
Is that something you guys are doing for your strategy, or because I'm with you? While you think about that, but like I'm with you that like I hate So when I ran in 2022, I didn't do outside, like I think like a month before the election, I finally caved and started a Facebook and Instagram page for my campaign. But I had actually deleted my previous Facebook page because all the things that you said. I hate how social media like influences and impacts people. I actually had like a funny meme. It still exists to a degree, but what I did on Facebook was all funny memes because it was fun for me and because I liked getting likes. So I would find like the best memes and I would follow how many people like them. And when people didn't like them, I was like, okay, what's wrong with that? Why don't people? Because I was always trying to get better. And people would tell me when I would see them, like, oh, the funny meme guy. And so people were like, you're the only reason I get on Facebook. And I was like, I don't think I should be on Facebook because I don't want people to be living their life on Facebook. But the reality is that this is where people are. And you have to, if you want to reach people, you have to go where they are, especially it seems to me, younger people. One of the things that I tell people is that, your younger people, generally speaking, when you go knocking doors, because one of the classic historical ways to win votes is to knock doors. Problem is, young people don't like to answer the door. Like I've
True.
so many friends my age that they will pretend that they're not home. They may even
Yeah, it happens all the time.
They may even turn the light off, and it's like, well, I know you're there, but you clearly don't want to talk to me, so I will move on, right? So in a culture where younger people won't come to the doors, it seems to be like this is not only can it kind of help motivate the base, but also reach younger people. But it's something that we need to do and we need to get better at. Not just X. So people who are watching on X that are like, yeah, social media. It's like, I know that X is a place where
Think
people
bigger.
from X is a place where there are people that will get on from both sides of the aisle. I think, especially, a lot of your younger people that are not politically engaged, which are the people we need to reach. We do need to reach politically engaged people that are liberals, sure. But we actually, more than that, we need to reach the middle of the road people that aren't like super bought into either ideology and probably vote left just because the media tells them that it's the nice thing to do, right? That's the group of people that we need to engage with. And in order to engage with those people, we need to go where they are. And those people, by and large, are not on X. They're on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
I mean, with my chapter, something Turning Point will tell you when they're coaching you how to grow your chapters. They say have an Instagram account. And we did that for a while. And that's nice because that's where we can post all of our pictures and it gives us like a gallery and we can send people there for links and stuff. We don't have a whole lot of followers on there, mostly just, local homeschoolers and friends and stuff. But recently we did get onto Facebook. And the reason I did that is because we, as a chapter, it's not just about our students, but we do have a lot, like I said, our outer circle of people who are beyond age 25, but also are interested in seeing these movies and need to be educated and want to hear these messages and have a community, things like that, are on Facebook. And Facebook is a lot better for things like that. So we have recently got on Facebook. Go follow TPUSA at Kennebec County. There's no, I'll just throw that little plug in there. And that's where I went because I'm trying to reach the older people and I'm trying to reach the younger people on Instagram. We're not on X yet because I think that if we were on X, it would need a lot of attention. We don't quite have the manpower for that right this moment. But overall, I think if you want to reach people, you're going to have to go where the people are, which unfortunately is on social media.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just something that we're going to have to do. People are going to, our X followers are going to say that you should get on X so that they can follow you. So that even if
I'm personally on X.
Oh, you are? Okay. What's your handle?
I think my name is Kristina Parker, but my handle I think is efficiency_boss. I just recently updated my username. There's not a lot of posts on there. I was never a Twitter person, but I'm just kind of on X because I'm realizing that's where all the politics is happening, and it is a little bit better at keeping me up to date than Instagram, but maybe if you guys are interested, I'll post on there more or something like that.
Well, I think it's one of the best places. I think Facebook is a great place with groups if you're following groups and things like that. But I think the way that X's algorithm works is it's a better place to get a more effective news feed. And I find that a lot more information, especially news related, is shared on X. And there's a growing community. We have the Pine Tree Patriots, which is a group of maybe 1,000 people that are conservatives primarily, or that are focused on trying to help us make Maine red or less blue. And so, like, any information that's helpful, sharing stuff on there, they love to hear it. They love to share stuff. It's probably where we get most of our live and even post live viewership from. And so they're a great group. Yeah. So anyway, so social media, but I think not as much as I love X. I think we need to look at the other platforms as well, as you kind of have mentioned.
Just don't put all your eggs in one basket, kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I think one of the other things,
one
of the other things that you've said that I think is really interesting, and I think conservatives who, especially people who lead county committees and state and city committees and things like that, need to be mindful of this, is the idea of keeping it to an hour. I can't. I've been to meetings that lasted 2 hours. Those are
depends
tough.
on what you're doing, but
those
probably not over an hour.
That most of those are tough, and then also, I think keeping it fun and engaging. And I think what's interesting is you say that because, like, one of the things, in order to make sure that the youth are engaged, you need to keep it fun and engaging. I think that's true of people of all ages. I mean, there are some people that'll show up no matter what, and doesn't matter how long the meeting goes, they're going to be there. But we need to, in order to grow anything, you need to have it be fun and engaging. And one of the things that we do, in Cumberland County, where I'm the vice chair, is outside of our meeting, we have like monthly socials where people can bring other friends, and we tend to get other people who wouldn't necessarily go to a meeting that'll come to these socials. So whatever we can do to build our movement are things that we need to do, whether that's social media, social events, or speaking events. What other advice, if you have any additional advice, would you have for conservatives in Maine who want to help make Maine red?
Make Maine red. Well, I've already said what I think about getting your students involved. The reason I'm involved is because of my mom. So I say already, bring your kids to the meetings. Honestly, I mean, I'm not a parent, so people might be like, well, she's only 19, she doesn't know. But I mean, maybe force your kids to do a little bit of campaign work, as long as they don't completely hate the candidate and they're not completely gone to the left. Maybe say, this is part of your homeschooling curriculum to volunteer on a part of a campaign because you're an American or you're a Mainer, like, do your part, kind of thing. So you could do a little bit of that. Don't go overboard, or else you're going to get sued by somebody for something. But, make your kids do some stuff, bring them along, even if they just want to bring a coloring book while you're working on campaigns, things like that. And then keeping the meetings to less than an hour also, I think, is important. I didn't think that was going to be a big deal when I said that, but you seem to think that was like controversial or something. But I love God. I love church. I love everyone at my church. But if my pastor is going to talk for more than 45 minutes, I'm going to fall asleep. He either has to be like Tucker Carlson, Dennis Prager, Charlie Kirk, or someone who's doing something really ridiculous on stage for me to pay attention for more than 45 minutes. And keeping your message less than an hour is really important. People have things to do. I mean, politics is really important and it affects every part of your life. But also, if someone is at this county meeting and they have a family at home, they got to go home and cook dinner, or they're picking their kids up from sports, or they have other hobbies, believe it or not, for us politics people who just do politics all the time, is there are individuals who have hobbies beyond just their local Republican committee meeting. So keeping it less than an hour is important. And I think the socials thing is a really great idea, like what you said. And I mean, I almost would say everything I said about my turning chapter before is find a way to integrate that into your county meetings. Is my local county will do giveaways every once in a while, or they'll do a 50-50. Is that can be fun. And things like that. We maybe show a cool video in the beginning, or bring in a speaker, or have someone come in and talk about their life, or things like that, keeping it to shorter, like 5-10 minute type things. But I mean, I said that our chapter is going to go bowling, and we've had days where we've gone to the range and we've shot at the IFW place in Sydney, and we want to go there again this coming summer. And like I said, bowling, movies, things like that. And with the committee meetings, you probably only need to meet once a month. And if you're going to go beyond an hour, have something that people are doing. But another thing, you'll find this interesting, is the Leadership Institute trains people how to run campaigns and how to be a good volunteer organizer and how to be organized and good at communicating and write press releases is they'll have something called the Youth Leadership School, where they'll pay to have students from all around the country fly into whatever location they're doing it at. You'll get a weekend-long political boot camp, and you'll learn everything you need to know. And then they have more trainings beyond that. And something I've always done when I have volunteers on campaigns is playing music. I was up until midnight one time stamping and putting return address stickers on a huge envelope project, and I had my buddies who I had a huge task to do is I had to get these envelopes done and send them out so they could get to the constituents. It needs to be done. So I had my friends helping me. And at the end, one of my buddies said to me, "You make volunteering easy," because we listen to the Waltz Vance debate, we play music, and I bought them sushi and some soda. Is if you can make the volunteering fun and interesting, and if you can have good conversation while you're doing it, it can be a good time. And like I said, it's social, and it's if you do it with your friends or you become friends with the people that you're involved in politics with, then you can honestly have a really good time. So nobody is going to want to sit in a meeting and listen to one guy drone on for 40 minutes about why he thinks you need to paint your fair sign a certain color because it's going to attract more people at the local fair or whatever. Nobody wants to listen to that. No offense. Short, sweet, to the point, get the information out, get onto something that people are going to care about a little bit more.
I think you're absolutely right about the speaker piece, because like I think one of the things that we sometimes forget, like I think we're still running these meetings as though we're 20 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 20 years ago, like in order for you to get information, you needed to bring in a speaker. That's not the case today, right? People can get the access to information. Really good speakers is easily available on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever. So a lot of the aspects of like getting information we can actually get from other sources. And so whereas like before, it would be like, oh, we've got this special speaker coming in and this is the only way that you're going to hear this message. Well, that's not the case anymore, right? So I think adjusting our approach and definitely having shorter meetings is something that's appropriate. But I like what you're saying about like keeping it fun, even when we're getting people involved, having some competitions. We did at one of our county meetings, we had a time where we like wrote people's names for sending letters for mailers. We wrote them out. We didn't have stickers, so I had to write out the addresses that things were getting sent to. So I I did that. And like, but like having an element that makes it fun, that creates some competition,
music,
there's food involved. Yeah,
I'm telling you, man.
I think those types of things are great ideas. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. So when are you going to run for office?
Well, I can't technically run until 2028 at the earliest because you have to be over 21. And at that point, I'll be 22. But before that, I would only be 20. I tell you what, I probably will run for office at some point. My mom has been trying to get me to run for Waterville Town Council. And I'm thinking I'm already doing way too much in politics and I'm helping other people do that I don't need to right now. You know, if the opportunity arises, I might do it. I will probably run for office at some point. I'm not sure. And if that's what people want, and if people want me to represent them, then I would be happy to do so with the experience I have in politics. I tell you what, I love working on campaigns and I love grassroots trainings and activism, kind of like my bio said, and I like engaging younger students. I actually just had a conversation with a kid like 2 days ago. Somebody texted me and said, "Hey, someone's going to text you. They're really interested in starting a Turning Point chapter. They have some friends." So I talked on the phone with this guy, and he's 15 years old, and he wants to start a Turning Point chapter, and he already has his buddies. And I got to talk to him and give him a to-do list of what he needs to do to start his chapter and coach him through that and explain, you know, how to make a social media graphic and why having pizza at your meeting is going to bring more people than if you didn't have pizza at your meeting, and coaching people. So if I can pour into others and learn myself, because I really like self-education, and build others up, then that's what I'm focused on right now and just trying to get experience. But I am only 19 years old, so I've got hopefully a lot of time ahead of me to continue serving Maine.
Yeah, no, obviously I was saying that a little bit tongue in cheek. Obviously, I think people who are watching are thinking like we need more people involved. Actually, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently who was like, we've got to talk to some of these younger people and see if we can get them to run for school boards and city councils and stuff like that. And my thought was, well, we don't want to overwhelm them. And I'm not surprised to hear that there's a lot of people vying for your attention because, you know, we don't have a lot of younger people being involved. And so people need to be mindful and and not overwhelm you. But if you're like having the opportunity to help people start chapters, and there are ways that you're willing to help. So if somebody is looking to start, or maybe they're one of their kids is looking to start a chapter of Turning Point activism hub or something like that, they can reach out to you. It's the best way just to give them your Twitter handle or email, or what do you want to put on?
I mean, I can just tell you, I'm on Twitter, so I said that before. It's efficiency_boss. I'm a big ENTJ bossy lady, and I like getting things done, organized, stat. We don't got time for messing around, kind of thing. So you can reach out to me on there. On Instagram, I'm at Kris P.26. You can reach me there. You could Facebook message me. Our chapter is TPUSA Kennebec County 1776 on Instagram, and we're also TPUSA at Kennebec County on Facebook. You can reach out to any of those places, and me or one of my fellow executive members from my chapter will reach back, and then we can exchange email and phone number, and I would be happy to chat and give you some guidance how to spring up a chapter in your area, because Kennebec County, our little chapter, can't take care of the whole state. So I would love to see more chapters and more people my age involved.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Before we end, do you have anything else that you want to share with people, or are you good?
I mean, talk to your students, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, like anybody who is younger than you. At least start having conversations with them, and give them some responsibility. They're capable of more than you think, and I want to say believe in them, and I think that Maine can have a bright future if we're willing to put in the work. That's what I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll chat for a little bit after the podcast is over. And thank everybody for watching. Again, we are creating these podcasts to get more information out to the people. And if you didn't know, and maybe or you didn't believe that the Turning Point Activism Hub or something like that could exist here in Maine, it can. And there are people, and if you're interested in getting one started, reach out to Kris, and let's do that. But also, like, share, subscribe. Muddy Waters Podcast has presences on. It's all it's Muddy Waters ME for Maine. Sometimes it's at, sometimes there's underscores depending on the platform. But we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, here on Twitter, obviously, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, all the places, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcast. So far, I have a perfect 5.0 score on both of those, so please don't ruin it. But we have, again, there are a lot of ways to find our content, and we try to create smaller clips that are easier to share because, again, just like people don't like going to long meetings, they also don't like listening to hour-long podcasts, some of them. So there are shorter clips that we can share. So if you can go help out to get more information out to the people of Maine, find me, like, share, subscribe, so that we can, help make Maine red. So thank you all. We will see you again. Actually, tomorrow normally we're just Monday and Thursday, but this week we have another special podcast because gubernatorial candidate Robert Wessels is going to be on the podcast tomorrow night, 7:00. We'll see you all then. Thanks.